There are things known, and there are things unknown. In between are the doors. I hated this place. The halls, for as bright as they seemed to be, filled me with far more fear than Pye's orchard had. It was too clean, too quiet for it to have been even seeming to exist in our wasteland. It hadn't helped that the reputation of orchards like this meant that we were never safe here, and with the AI, Tempest, we were never alone. So, Tasteless decided to break the relative silence of our wandering. Our hooves clacked on the spotless floors and echoed down the halls of what felt like the whole damned facility. Abandoned facility that no pony's been in for half a century. A crazy AI running the place, and that evil douchebag running around the other side. She rolled her neck with a few soft pops before looking at me. Kinda boring so far, if you ask me. Boring's good, Skyline remarked in a way that, to me, sounded like she'd had an experience like Pretius and I had. Trust me on that. For being all secretive, this place doesn't have nearly as much tech as I thought it would, is all. Tasteless shrugged and cast a glance to Sky. I like these kinds of facilities, because they normally have good techie stuff in them. She let a devilish grin crawl across her muzzle, and let out a sigh like she was remembering a long-lost love. You know, the kind of shit that blows up if you knock it around too hard. You know, the Rangers want this facility intact. Gage muttered as she trudged next to Tasteless. All she got in return was a huff and a short shake of her head. Ah, come on. At least don't blow up anything on purpose. She waited until Tasteless turned her gaze before giving her the whitest, saddest eyes she could. I'd seen some buttering up before, and tried it once or twice myself, but I've never seen it as that cheesy. Fine. Tasteless sighed. I'll try to avoid shooting anything that looks expensive and boring. She nudged back into Gage with a smile. But if it's something shiny and has a caution label, all bets are off. Probably the best deal you'll get. Pretius spoke up before pulling my attention towards an oncoming door. Haven't seen a door on this side for a while. I bet it's a fairly large room. Might be worth seeing if it gets us closer to the other side of the arm. I'll check ahead. Skyline called as she floated over my head, with just enough spare room for her hooves to brush against my mane. I've got armor. I'll check too. Shadow called out from the rear of our little group. Knowing how close Sky got, both Preet and I moved aside. He gave me a quick smile as he flapped his wings and zipped after her. The rest of us came to a stop, waiting for an all-clear before going headlong into the new room. In our quick moment of rest, I looked back at the way we'd come. The bright hallway seemed to stretch on forever behind us. Most of the doors in this place were open, but the rooms contained little more than arcanotech computers and terminals that did who the hell knows what. Mostly, I was surprised how the sentry bots we'd fought were the only ones here. Storm? Skyline called from the next room. You might want to see this. Preet and I both started up at the door and peeked our heads in. The room beyond was quite large and stacked with almost a dozen widely sized wooden crates. It would have been an oddity, though, just for that. Of course. The odd thing was that each crate had writing on it. Not the kind of writing we'd normally see here in Equestria. Is that zebra writing? Pretius perked up and pushed his way past me into the room. I'm a little rusty, but I might be able to decipher a bit of it. Funny. The second he was needed to any sort of work, he'd outright avoid it. Now somebody mentions something cryptic, and he's on it like glue. Sounds about right. I turned and nodded for the others to follow, and in short order, we'd all piled in around Pretius. The grade he'd chosen to look at was just about pony height, and just over pony in length. The only marking it had I even recognized on it was a large H. I'd seen it before on old pre-war clippings about a city named Hoofington. Ah, I see. Pretius muttered with a low grumble. He lifted a hoof and scraped at his chin in thought. giving a soft nod. He then just sat there, stark silent for nearly a minute. "Well?" the Major blurted out. "What is it?" "I don't know," Proteus responded flatly. "I don't know that dialect." I joined along with nearly everyone else as we all groaned with our disappointment. We're on a freaking timetable here. We can't take dramatic pauses for shit that doesn't explain anything. "Well, what's zebra riding doing on a bunch of crates in an orchard?" I try to offer an alternative to this. I don't know why they would have them, but if it's a place like this, it has to be important. "That is a good question." Proteus nodded at me with a smirk. It might have just been me, but I think he was proud of me for asking a question like that. "Don't worry, I got this." Tasteless barely got out as she pushed past Preet and I. She spun on her hooves and gave the container a swift buck on the side. The century-old crate shook violently and showered us all with dust. However, we were rewarded with one side of the crate clattering to the floor. "It's a known fact that physical violence is the same in every language." "Whoa!" Gage gasped like she'd just seen the goddesses. From where she stood, she was the first to see whatever was inside. The rest of us shifted over to see for ourselves, giving our own variations and confused gasps and murmurs. I'd never seen anything like it. As best as I could describe it, it looked like a house cat. Well, as much as if a house cat had 6 legs, was made of metal, and had 2 machetes sticking out of its muzzle. "Oh, now that makes sense." Proteus bounced his gaze between the odd mechanism and the writing on the front of the crate. "It's a late model Razor Cat from Hoofington Battlefront. No wonder this thing was labeled wrong. It's because it's not written in our zebras. Rather, it was captured from the zebra lines." "The fuck is a Razor Cat?" Tasteless scoffed, seemingly unimpressed by the weapon. However, Gage was practically squirming her way into the crate to get a look at it. "In short," Proteus sighed, "it's a extinct predator from the zebra lands, known for its 4 razor-sharp, horizontal fangs and its extreme sprint speed." As he talked, Proteus reminded me of some of the scientists from when I was a filly. They droned on and on about whatever it was, and it just made them sound bored. Stories say that Razor Cats used its incredible speed to catch fleeing prey so it could disembowel them with their fangs. It was one of the most dangerous beasts they knew of. So, of course, they hunted the specimens to extinction. Then they built them and stuck them in the fighting. The Major winced as he picked up without missing a beat. They would run them through the trenches. He shook his head with a horrified tone in his voice. Like a friend says, the outcome in those tight quarters wasn't pretty. "So, what's it doing down here?" Shadow hesitantly asked. "For the scientists to learn about it, of course." Proteus smiled and waved his hoof across the crates. "I'm betting this is all a reverse engineering lab." He trotted forward and towards the machine to look it over. Normally, all that would ever get sent back to places like this were scattered parts or damaged husks. It would be rare to have a complete model like this captured. "That is correct." Tempest's voice boomed throughout the room. "This model was acquired via an equestrian zebra spy, saving it from destruction." "All you're gonna do over here is follow us around and make boring comments?" Tasteless walked up and kicked at the crate again. "I have been observing each of you, and I have made a deduction based on a number of factors. Being analyzed by the AI running the place, that can only lead to disaster. I've surmised that you, Project Harmony, are the leader of this group. Based on the files that I acquired from Pi, I have also come to the conclusion that you are, as they say, a gambling mare. Would you like to play a game?" Oh, I know this reference," Gage blurted out, nearly poking out of the box with her hooves. "Let's play Global Megaspell Warfare." She leaned over against Timeless and tried to sound impressive once again. "Mare games. I must have watched a vid 100 times back in the rec center. Sounds like a predictable move, seeing as we're living the result. Tasteless didn't seem to care for Gage's bragging, which made me wonder why she'd been trying so hard recently. A simple hiss emitted from the doors to this room, ripping my attention from the two. The heavy steel slabs slammed shut without any warning, trapping us all inside. Stealing my files is a low blow, Tempest. My pibbuck crackled to life. What do you want? Pie's voice was more commanding than normal. Just a friendly wager to keep things interesting. She responded slowly. I don't know what it was about her voice, but she spoke like a mare in a brothel, slowly trying to wind us into following wherever she'd lead us. Each of the major research sections of this major projects room, such as this one. 5 in total, before you reach the control room, in fact. She gave a short pause to breathe, which was an odd thing for something that didn't breathe. It is also the same number of you who have trespassed in this orchard without clearance. There's 6 of us, Prettius annoyingly pointed out. I gave him my best glare to imply that we probably shouldn't piss off the AI. Incorrect. Project Harmony was created for the orchard, therefore has clearance. Miss Skyline has family-related MOM clearance, and there are 5 ponies outside, those 2 without the right to be here. This wasn't news to me, as her brother had been related to the Ministry Mayor. It only made sense that when he died, his clearance went to her. Getting back to the wager, here is what I propose. In each room, I'll give you a challenge. If you happen to beat it, I'll unlock the doors and let you move on ahead to the next one. 1 specific task or adversary, 1 victory, for 1 reward. Where I come from, Shadow imposed from the back of us. Deals work for the benefit of both parties. What do you get out of it? Oh, just a little tone of fun is all. Her tone changed to one of arrogance, and it generally pissed me off. It wasn't sure if it had been on purpose, but I wanted more than anything to beat this bitch at her own game. Tell you what, I'll even sweeten the pot. If one of the trespassing 5 happens to die in the challenge, you'll win automatically and get to move on. She gave a low and eager cackle. So, what'll it be, Project Harmony? Will you take my challenge? Don't do it. Prettiest mutters the only voice of reason in the room. When I gazed at the others, they only looked to me for an answer. Why would I? I was supposed to be the one in charge. Storm, I know you. You're smarter than this. It's not worth the risk. It might be. Pie chimed in as she did. If these challenges are just a simple task, this may give you the edge to get the control room quickly. Which was a good point. If she was making the same deal with Phileas, we could use every time advantage we could get. Besides, there's 7 of you. I knew what she'd say next, and it only made me shiver. How hard could it be? How can we trust her? The Major brought up. She seems quite content to kill us all so far, so how can we trust anything that she says? Because I've seen her coding. She's incapable of telling a lie to ponies. Pie, as always, gave a good counterpoint. Pie's right. I had to go with this. I accept your terms. We'd come so far for the chance to get there first. It was worth the risk. There was such a succulence in the tone that Tempest gave. If the state I found Pie in was an indication, being locked away didn't seem to be too healthy for these APs. Well then, let's get started. My decision must have come as quite a shock to every pony, because the air practically vibrated with their disbelief. No, wait. The air was actually vibrating, and an agonizing whine was steadily growing louder. A piercing blast of steam shot from the side of the large robotic predator. It was accompanied by a whirling, grinding noise that slowly pulsed faster and faster until it became a dizzying thump. With a shudder, the pistons that moved the legs actuated, and the beast stepped out from its crate. Only when it had cleared it did its eyes light up and turn to face me. "The challenge," Tempest's voice came through the mouth of the robot, "is to beat Unit 00113. "Let me take this one." Sky stepped up and stretched out her wings. The two Gauss rifles at her side let out their own whines as she put the bit into her mouth and powered them on. "I can finish this quick." She tried to mutter through her bit, but it was hard to understand her. The machine turned and looked at her. "Is your memory so limited that you do not remember the terms?" Tempest revealed in the absurdity of the situation. "I dictate the challenges, and that includes who participates." She turned the robotic monstrosity to face me. With a jutting thrust, she poked the metal front paw at me, but after only a moment she turned it away. The huge arm was now pointed square at Proteus. "I challenge him." "So what? The rest of us just stand back and watch?" Tasteless huffed and slung her shotgun. "'Cause I didn't come all this way to just watch." She popped a joint in her neck and presented her best shit-eating grin. I'd be lying if I said that the thought of Proteus fighting the thing didn't worry the hell out of me. I'd been through so much with him now, and he'd stuck by me through it as best he could. He'd proven useful in a few fights so far, but even so, he's only one stallion. The thought that he, my first real friend, could die right here and now, it made me rethink my whole risk assessment. I felt his hoof come down on my shoulder. "Storm, I can do this." He calmly reassured me with his voice, but it did little to stall the increasing panic building up inside of me. I trusted him more than anything else, any pony else here. But even if I had my limits to believe it, "I will need the rest of you to stand in the decontamination safety square." Tempest spoke and used the robot to direct us to the most open section of the room. On the floor was a black and yellow striped hollow cube that sat against the wall. While big enough to fit us all, and even with Pye's words, I didn't trust Tempest. After a moment of no pony moving, she cleared her throat. "I would like to remind you that a failure to do so would be a breach of our agreement. If you wish to back out, I can activate the units in the other boxes and promptly dispose of you all." "A deal is a deal," Proteus snapped at her. I could hear the jitters he had in his voice, and even with those, he turned around and offered a soft smile to me. "Go. Either way, you must get to the control room, with or without me." "I know I don't have to tell you." I sighed, wholeheartedly regretting my decision. I've fucked up a lot in my life, and much more so recently. But be careful. As the rest of us shuffled slowly off towards the old metal box, I looked over at Skyline. I could see the hatred for this place plastered across her face. She had been the only one of us to have gone through this before, and she lost her brother to it. Between Pallet and him, I couldn't help but also question my decision to bring her along. I had the horrible feeling that the longer we stayed here, the greater chance that she wasn't going to leave here alive. Once we'd all gotten ourselves situated in the box, it began to hum. A purplish, opaque magical field flickered along the boundaries of the box, trapping us inside. As soon as it had, the machine started to walk backwards away from Proteus. "The containment field here is to keep any stray objects from injuring you," Tempest chimed over the intercom system again. "And to keep you from interfering." The robot came to a stop near the far wall from Proteus. With another sharp hiss, several sets of steam shot from underneath the robot, and it lowered itself into a semi-crouched position. From here, the whole form of it looked like it was built to be fast and sharp. "Are you not going to arm yourself?" Tempest gave a forceful laugh, speaking with as much enthusiasm as you'd think she'd already won. "If you would allow me a moment to prepare." Proteus snorted in contempt, his horns shimmering under his magic, and the flap on his saddlebags opened. Slowly, the large minigun he carried slipped out of his bags. I really hoped that he'd brought a lot of ammo for it, back in Tenpony. That bag. I've never seen one like it before. The Major pushed up against me lightly as he got close to the magical field as possible. I've heard about them, but they were so expensive back in the day. Where in Equestria did he find one? Well, Tasteless sighed and hooked her hoof around the Major's neck. You see, over a century ago, most ponies in Equestria just magically stopped using them. The sarcasm bled from her words, and we all groaned as she relished in being a bitch. Luckily, Sky stepped in with her first non-gloom and doom remark. Early traders found warehouses full of them. They're everywhere in the wastes now. The little fun back and forth had been enough of a distraction that we'd almost missed Preed's gun spinning up. The floor quaked under our hooves, and the heavy clang of metal on concrete rang throughout the room. The fight was on. Preed's gun spat a line of fire straight at the charging beast. For as big and heavy as it was, the machine was quite agile. The roar of his gun beat out the rending metal as it sheared off chunk after chunk of the beast. It shifted its charge around him as the shots paused. At first, I'd thought it was trying to flank him, but the machine tipped as though it turned and slammed against the floor. Like a wounded creature, the machine tried to get back up. One of its forward legs had been completely shot off, and the middle leg on the other side sparked when it tried to stand on it. For a zebra machine, it may have been agile, but it wasn't at all durable. You seem to have wildly overestimated your toy's capabilities. Previous taunted in the arrogant way he tended to. Even though he had the upper hoof, I wasn't sure that taunting Tempest was the best course of action, though he had earned my respect for having done well so far. The beast let out a grinding screech as it torqued and pushed itself up. There was a quick snap as the two injured limbs twisted in place. A deafening clap accompanied them shooting off each side of the beast, leaving gaps in its sides where they were once mounted. The robot did what I could best describe as a wiggle before stiffening its curled tail. Then, with another hiss, it was rock steady and quickly lowered itself to strike again. Even without the extra limbs, it was deceptively fast. The quick recovery and dive to action had caught Preetius off guard. The old ghoul dropped down and twisted his gun towards his foe. The gun was slow this time to spin up, spilling its rounds just over the beast as it curled down. Either through luck or Tempest's own arrogance, the machine's namesake blades swung wide of Preetius as it ducked past him. Instead, the machine turned away from him and used its whip-like metal tail. Preetius cried out as it swept him off the floor and through the air. The wet immediate thump of him hitting the wall behind him made every pony in the cage cringe. The magic around his gun faded as Preetius groaned on the floor. For only a split second, his illusion spell faltered, and I could see the black blood that came from the back of his head. His heavy and wet-sounding wheezes bored out a bigger pit in my stomach than I had thought possible to have. The bot gave another hiss and stopped. Slowly it stood back up on its normal height and paced around Preetius. Oh, it's simply amazing, isn't it? Tempest's voice boomed through the speaker again. Adaptive programming? This robot has full control over its own parts, shedding its unneeded or undamaged components to keep itself combat effective. The bot looked like a cat circling its prey, just waiting for the right moment to pounce and finish it off. I hoped and prayed to the goddess that Preed had something left to use, some strategy that could keep him once again turning the tables. It is amazing. Preed's wheezing laugh sent shivers down my spine. I glanced back over to his gun, waiting for it to move, but it stayed where it laid. But he spat. It has the same problem as every other machine. And what is that? Tempest gave her own haughty laugh. It needs power. Preetius grunted before his own flashed. There was a shower of sparks from inside the machine that poured through the open leg holes. The heavy metal of the beast shuddered and collapsed, shooting blasts of steam from nearly every port it had. From the hole where its leg had been, floated out a small cylinder with a copper top. With a flick of his magic, It bounced on the floor and rolled towards us. Tempest grunted over the speakers. Several short alarms sounded through the room, and the heavy doors leading out to the hallway started to grind open. The force field around the box dissipated as well, though the same could be said about my fears for what lay ahead. As soon as they had dropped completely, I took off for Pred. "Pred, how can I help?" I gasped as I slid up next to him. Carefully, I hooked my hoof around him and helped him to sit up further. The illusion that hid his ghoul form was fine, but even it couldn't hide the blood that dripped onto my hoof. "You can start by whispering to me, maybe?" He groaned and waved a hoof at me. "Don't worry, I've had worse. I'll be fine in an hour or so." "That was a hell of a hit you took!" Gage stammered as she nearly yelled the obvious to us. Prettiest cringed more than the rest of us, but Gage did catch it. This time she lowered her voice. "How aren't you dead with those injuries?" "Well, you see," Prettiest muttered and motioned for me to help him back to his hooves. "When the machine jettisoned its parts, it created an opening for me to work my magic into." His ragged breathing was horrible to listen to, but if he didn't think he needed more help, I wasn't going to push it on him. It wasn't hard from there to find where I'd certainly hoped was its main power source. "First of all, that's not what I asked." Gage shook her head in confusion. "Secondly, you guessed?" She face-hoofed, accidentally using her cyber hoof and giving her horn a loud tap. She quickly shook off the knock to her own head and continued. "You could have pulled anything out. What made you so sure it was the power core?" "Just like the heart, it is the most protected part of any animal." He gave a rasping laugh. "I just had to find something big and in the middle of it." "You may have passed this challenge, but the next one awaits." Tempest huffed at us, beckoning our attention once again to the wall-mounted speakers. "Collect your companion and get moving." Then her tone took a very interesting turn. "Oh, how remarkably convenient!" The mirth she emitted chilled me to the bone. "It looks like your next challenge will be against one of your other group. How interesting will this be?" Knowing it was one of two ponies, the thought of being matched up against Phileas filled me with dread. Even worse, if she didn't match me against him, but some pony inexperienced like Gage. On the reverse side, I couldn't really justify one of ours killing Stratos to get ahead. The only reason he's still doing anything for Phileas is to save his daughter. Could I really take away her father just for an easy win? The thought of something earlier slipped in my mind. They weren't the only two I had to worry about down here. Phileas had mentioned that one of our own was coming for us, and I had no clues as to who it was or when they'd strike. Had he gotten their hands his hooves onto one of us? Or has he got another Steel Ranger under his control? Either case, from the way it sounded in the dream, I didn't have much time to figure it out. "Storm, I wanted to talk to you for a moment." Prettiest sighed out and leaned forward. The way he looked when he said that struck me in a way that chilled me to the bone. "I, too, would like a word." The Major stepped forward past the others. "Okay, fine." I grumbled and looked at the sky. "Could you take the others out in the hall? We'll just be a moment." "Don't take too long." She nodded and rubbed her weary eyes. The quicker they finished this, the better. Which was something I wholeheartedly agreed with. Every pony but Prettiest and the Major headed out the door into the next hallway, while Skyline took up the rear of them. She gave me a worried look before she disappeared through the doorway. Between nearly getting Prettiest killed and Tempest's ever-watching eyes, I was really starting to understand Skyline's warnings. Both orchards I'd been to may at one point have been places of greatness, but now they were hives of death and sorrow. The pregnant pause in the room around us. I swore the only thing that I could hear was my heart as it beat in the tempo of my nervousness. The Major did me a favor and ripped my attention to him. "Look, I know you aren't MOM. "What?" That caught my surprise. Sure, we lied through our teeth to get here, but we couldn't have been that transparent. Frankly, I don't care where you're from. For a long time, we thought that we were the last of pony kind. He just shrugged off my question and continued. Now that I know there are others out there, I have the hope to go home. All of us who've been trapped here have that hope. Slowly he turned to look at me dead in the eyes. But what you did by making that deal back there, I won't stand for it. I don't know where you come from or who you think you are, but these ponies, they follow you for a reason. Don't you for one moment assume that means you can just auction off their lives like it's nothing. I don't know how things work anymore on the outside, but where I come from, a pony's life is their own. They get to decide what it's worth. No pony gets to say otherwise. He prodded his hoof sharply at my chest. Got that? Yes. My voice didn't reach more than a whisper, but it was all I could say. I get it. I'd fucked up. Again. My deal might have screwed us over, but it also was the only realistic chance that we had of getting out of here. Skyline was right. Some pony was going to die down here, and that was the realistic way of looking at it. Good. The Major nodded stiffly and turned to leave. He walked stiffly, reminding me of the soldiers I'd seen when I was just a filly. There were only soldiers, though. Not problem solvers like the scientists that worked just as hard every day to win the war. I'm certain that even the Major couldn't have offered any other solution to this. The thought that my father would have known how best to have gone about this brought me both comfort, but left me feeling hopelessly lost. Storm. Prettius half sighed and half groaned through his own pain. I get it. I whined and sat down hard. I should have listened to you. No. Prettius put his hoof under my chin and turned my gaze towards him. It was me. I was wrong. He shook his head and gave a wheezing laugh. Sure, I could have died, but I didn't. It shouldn't have been my call. I tried to offer back, but he moved his hoof to my lips. The Major was right. These ponies follow you for a reason. Prettius grunted and stepped up beside me. It's because we trust you. Because we believe in you. He pulled on me, successfully making me get back to my hooves. I didn't feel like going, but I knew we had to. Finishing this task is something we all want. We've known the risks, and we know what the reward is if we succeed. How can you say that? I kept my head down as we headed for the door. How could I look the others in the eye? Because if they didn't agree with your decision, they would have spoken up. He pulled himself closer to me and limped slightly as he pointed to the hallway. The Major may not have made the same decision if it had been his call, but even he knows that you made the right choice. That didn't make any sense to me. You're a natural leader, Storm. That's why, even now, you question if your decision was really the right one to make. I don't want to lead. Taking responsibilities like caring for the group into my hooves was not a choice I'd made. It was simply something that needed to be done at the time. What makes me more qualified to lead than you? You probably know heaps more about strategy and even how to keep a group together than I do. He pulled back on me, drawing us to a halt. A leader isn't about having all the answers. He gave me a genuine smile and rolled his eyes. If that were the case, I can tell you that things would have ended up a lot differently. He gave me a pat on the neck and nodded. No, being a leader is about knowing and about learning how to be a better pony. You need to make mistakes, and to make the call that everyone will hate you for. Above all, you'll need to live with those decisions, knowing that you've done it all to benefit them. That makes no sense. How the hell am I supposed to lead when I'm not supposed to know what I'm doing? I sighed as he started to move again. We passed through the door frame and into another glaringly bright hallway. The rest of the group was far ahead of us, standing at what had to have been the next challenge room. That's for me to know, and you to figure out. Preed chuckled lightly. And I'm going to love watching you tear your mane out over how stupidly easy it is when you finally figure it out. His chuckle grew into a deep-bellied laugh that echoed through the empty hall. As much as I tried to fight it, a smile slowly stretched across my own muzzle. You're a dick, you know that. I giggled out with him, soon joining him with my own laughter. Unfortunately, the closer we got to the others, the quicker our laughter dropped off. The large steel door to the next room lay before us. The only one in the group who had any semblance of emotion on their faces was Shadow. Even he only offered a faint trace of a smile as he looked at me. Slowly, though, he turned to face the door like the others. Without a word, Preed and I took a position in front of them. Tasteless stood at my side and shifted on her hooves uneasily. We're just gonna stand out here forever, she muttered and gave me and the door a swift kick with her forehoof. Open up already. Just getting things ready. Tempest came over the set of hidden speakers. I didn't want to ruin the surprise. A shrill grinding noise started up. The door jolted for a moment before it started to raise up into the wall. A blast of hot air met our hooves from under the door, and just the slight hint of decay swam into our nostrils. As the door rose up higher, my heart beat faster. Finally, as the door rose past our eyes, we learned just who Tempest had chosen to fight us. I, for one, had never thought I'd have seen her half-charred form ever again. I wanted to speak, but it was Skyline who found the word first. Palette? Chapter end. Leadership and learning are indispensable to each other. Quests finished none, quests started none, levels earned none, perks earned none.